Sophia was the only daughter of Daniel, a man whose wealth could buy nearly anything except the one thing he wanted most time. She was just 6 years old when the unimaginable happened. The child who once ran through the garden with boundless energy and laughter began to grow tired. Her tiny body weighed down by constant fevers and exhaustion. At first, Daniel thought it was something ordinary, maybe a lingering flu. But after endless hospital visits and blood tests, the truth struck like a bolt of lightning. Sophia was diagnosed with one of the rarest and most aggressive cancers known to modern medicine. The doctors explained it carefully, but Daniel could hardly hear beyond the words fast spreading and no cure. Her chances were almost non-existent. The prognosis was cruel. 3 months at best. No amount of money, no level of influence could change what the medical charts already said. Daniel had built his empire from the ground up. He was a man who had once solved every problem with determination, negotiation, or sheer force of will, but none of his power mattered when it came to his little girl. He poured millions into treatments, reaching out to specialists from across the world, chemotherapy, immunotherapy, clinical trials, every door that existed, he opened. Every possibility he chased. Yet each time, the hope was crushed when test results came back worse than before. Sophia endured it all with surprising bravery. Needles, scans, endless hospital rooms. She met them with the quiet resilience of someone far older than her years. She rarely complained. What she wanted most was simple: to feel better, to be at home, to play with her dolls and hear stories. Before bed, for Daniel, the hospital became his second home. Boardrooms and business meetings no longer mattered. His life now centered around the chair beside his daughter's bed. He read fairy tales aloud, held her fragile hand, and watched her sleep with a constant ache in his chest. The grief he carried was doubled by guilt. Years earlier, his wife had died while giving birth to Sophia. He had buried the woman he loved the very day his daughter came into the world. Now, the thought of losing Sophia felt like a curse so merciless it was almost unbearable. Sophia grew up without ever knowing her mother. Only a single photograph displayed on a shelf in the living room. In the picture, her mother was glowing, holding her pregnant belly with pride. Daniel often told Sophia stories about her, how kind she was, how her laughter filled every room, how much she had longed to meet the baby she never got to hold. Sometimes Sophia would gaze at the photo and whisper that she wished she could hug her just once. Daniel, swallowing his own tears, always answered with gentleness. As the illness spread, Sophia became weaker. Her body thinned. Her legs could barely carry her, and she often needed help even to sit upright. Yet she still managed to smile whenever her father cracked a joke or when a nurse surprised her with a small toy. Her optimism in the face of such cruelty humbled everyone who met her. Eventually, the doctors delivered the verdict Daniel had dreaded most. They had done all they could. The cancer had overtaken too much of her body. Treatments had failed, and her little system no longer responded to anything. 3 months at best, they said again. That night, Daniel sat in the dim hospital room, staring at his daughter while she slept peacefully, her breath light, her eyelids fluttering with dreams. He thought of the life she would never have. Her first day of school, her teenage years, her wedding day. The weight of it all crushed him. But in the morning, Sophia woke with a request that startled him. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice thin but certain. "Can I have a birthday party?" Daniel blinked, caught off guard. Of all the things she could have asked, more toys, a trip, a miracle. She asked for a party. Her birthday was only a few weeks away. When he asked why, Sophia said she had never had a real party before. She wanted balloons, music, cake, her classmates, and a dress that made her feel like a princess. Daniel's throat tightened, but he smiled and promised her it would be the best celebration she could ever dream of. That very day, he made the calls. The hospital staff offered their support. Sophia's schoolmates were invited, and friends rallied behind him. If his daughter wanted joy, then joy she would have. He knew deep down that this celebration was not about just cake and balloons. It was about giving her a memory filled only with happiness, free of pain and fear. While preparations unfolded, Sophia's condition continued to decline, but her excitement grew brighter. She chatted about what flavor the cake should be, what kind of music she wanted, and the games her friends might play. The anticipation gave her strength. The hospital allowed them to use a large room for the event. Nurses and doctors helped decorate it with purple and pink balloons, Sophia's favorite colors. She chose a princess theme, and one of the nurses even brought a toy crown for her. When she placed it on her head, Sophia laughed and said, "Today, I'm the queen." But beneath all the smiles, Daniel felt the shadow of sorrow. He knew what the party really meant. It was not just a birthday, it was possibly her last dot inside Daniel's mansion. Life had changed drastically since the death of his wife. The home, once alive with warmth and laughter, had turned silent and heavy. Nurses and caregivers moved in and out constantly, but their presence felt temporary, clinical. The only person who had truly stayed was Lena. Lena had joined the household years ago, when Sophia was just a baby. Initially, her role was simple housekeeping, cleaning, ordinary tasks, but life had other plans. With Daniel buried in work and grief, and no mother present, Lena slowly became Sophia's constant. She fed her, cradled her, sang lullabies, soothed her nightmares, and guided her through milestones. By the time Sophia was 4, she had naturally begun calling Lena Mommy Number 2. It wasn't something Daniel taught her. It came from Sophia's heart, and Lena, who had no children of her own, embraced the name with tears in her eyes every time. Behind Lena's devotion was her own story of loss. Years earlier, she had watched her younger sister suffer from an illness her family could not afford to treat. She had promised herself that if she ever had the chance again, she would never let another child go through such suffering without love and protection. Sophia became that child. For Lena, this was no longer employment. It was purpose. Every day she stayed by Sophia's side through treatments, fevers, laughter, and fears. Doctors and nurses came and went, but Sophia always reached out for Lena's hand when she was scared. Every drawing Sophia made included two mothers, the one in the photograph she never met, and Lena, who lived every day beside her. Daniel noticed the bond, but never tried to interfere, though at times it reminded him of what he had lost. Even, he couldn't deny that Lena gave Sophia something he could not. She made the house feel like a home again, and though Daniel still introduced her as the housekeeper, Lena's role had long since transformed into something unspoken, but irreplaceable. She wasn't just staff, she was family. The day of Sophia's party arrived, and the hospital room looked nothing like the sterile, somber place it usually was. The white walls were covered with ribbons and balloons. The tables were lined with snacks, and in the middle stood a cake decorated with soft frosting and glittering sprinkles. A paper crown rested on Sophia's head, and despite her frail body, her eyes glowed with joy. She sat in her wheelchair dressed in a pastel pink gown, her bald head uncovered from the harsh treatments, but her smile so radiant that no one noticed. Her weakness, children from her school gathered around, holding handmade cards, drawings, and small stuffed animals. The nurses, usually so busy with for drips and medicines, laughed as they joined in the celebration. For one afternoon, the air was filled with laughter instead of fear, music instead of machines. Sophia's classmates played simple games. Some drew pictures at a little table. Others chased balloons across the room. A nurse adjusted Sophia's chair so she could join in, and when she tired, Lena fed her small spoonfuls of cake, wiping the frosting from her chin with motherly care. To everyone present, it was clear that Lena wasn't just a helper in the household, she was part of Sophia's heart. Daniel stood near the doorway, silently observing. He spoke little, only greeting a few parents, but his eyes never left his daughter. Each smile she gave, each giggle she let out, he captured in his memory as though storing light for the darker days ahead. But then, in the midst of the music and the giggles, something happened that froze time. Sophia leaned her fragile head against Lena's arm. Her voice was soft, nearly drowned out by the sound of children playing. She looked directly at Lena with an innocence only a child could have and whispered, "Am I going to live, Mommy?" The room seemed to go silent. The laughter, the music, the movement, it all faded. Lena's heart felt as though it had stopped. She had been called Mommy Number 2 for years, but this time, Sophia hadn't said number 2. She had simply said Mommy. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was the truth her heart had chosen. Lena's lips trembled as she tried to answer. Every fiber of her being wanted to say yes. She wanted to lie just this once, to wrap Sophia in a promise that everything would be fine. But she couldn't. Not after all the nights of tears, the countless hours of pain, the endless honesty they had shared. Her eyes filled with tears, but she forced them not to fall. She took Sophia's tiny hand, squeezed it gently, and whispered, "You are very strong, my love, and I am right here with you." She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. But the weight of her silence spoke louder than words. From across the room, Daniel had overheard. He turned his face away, his hands covering his mouth. The question tore at him in ways no medical verdict ever had. It wasn't just his daughter's fragile body he was losing, it was her understanding of the truth. She knew her time might be short. After that moment, the party continued. But something had shifted. The children still played, but their voices grew softer, their laughter a little more careful. The adults tried to smile, but their eyes betrayed the heaviness of what they had heard. Sophia herself remained thoughtful, clutching Lina's hand as though she feared letting go. That night, when the guests had gone, Lina helped Sophia change into pajamas, brushed her teeth, and told her a bedtime story. She stayed until the little girl's breathing slowed into sleep. Daniel stood silently in the doorway, watching the two of them. The house, once again, was quiet but not empty. This silence was heavy with meaning. Lina, however, could not sleep. She lay in her room staring at the ceiling, the words echoing again and again in her mind. "Am I going to live, Mommy?" No matter how tightly she closed her eyes, she could still hear Sophia's small voice. Something inside her shifted that night. She realized she could no longer sit by and watch as fate slowly took the girl away. She had promised herself long ago that she would never let another child suffer as her sister had. Sophia was not just her employer's daughter, she was her child. So, in the middle of the night, Lina made a decision. She rose from bed, brewed a pot of coffee, and pulled out an old laptop that she rarely used. She began searching the internet relentlessly. Treatments, clinical trials, new medicines, experimental therapies. She read about cases from around the world. Some were tragic, others gave a flicker of hope, but she wasn't looking for statistics anymore. She was searching for a miracle. As the hours stretched on, her research narrowed. She stumbled upon stories of organ transplants, specifically living donor liver transplants. In rare cases, a healthy person could donate part of their liver to a child in need. The donor's liver would regenerate, and the child's failing organ would be replaced with something new and life-giving. It sounded dangerous, almost impossible, but Lina read every word with determination. There was a catch: compatibility, blood type, enzymes, tissue markers, all of it had to align. Usually, the best matches came from family members. By blood, she wasn't family, but in her heart, she knew she had to try. The very next morning, Lina visited a small clinic. She told them she wanted to be tested as a possible donor for someone very special. She didn't mention names, didn't explain her role in the household. The nurses, though surprised, agreed to run the tests. Days passed in agonizing silence. Lena returned to her routines: cooking, cleaning, caring for Sophia, but her mind was never present. Every ring of her phone made her heart race. Finally, the clinic called. They asked her to come in. She arrived early, her hands shaking as she clutched her bag. The doctor handed her a white envelope. Her fingers trembled as she opened it, staring at the numbers and codes she couldn't understand. Then the doctor explained that she was a match, not just a partial one, a perfect one. Blood type, enzymes, everything. A compatibility so rare that even the doctor was stunned. Lina sat motionless as the words sank in. She felt tears sting her eyes, not from fear, but from something that felt like destiny. The little girl who had chosen her as mommy number 2 wasn't her blood, but somehow their bodies matched, as if nature itself had tied them together. The doctor warned her of the risks. The surgery would be dangerous. Complications could change her health forever. She could even die, but none of that mattered. The thought of losing Sophia without trying was far more terrifying than the thought of risking her own life. As Lina left the clinic, the test results pressed against her chest. She whispered to herself, "I won't let you go, not without a fight." That night, she sat alone in her room, staring at a picture of Sophia taped to her mirror. She already knew what she had to do. She would fight every wall, every rule, every system if that's what it took, because Sophia was her daughter, not by blood, not by law, but by love. The morning after receiving her test results, Lena walked into the hospital with a sense of both fear and determination. In her bag was the envelope proving she was a perfect donor. Her hands were damp with sweat, but her heart was steady. She had made up her mind she would fight for Sophia, no matter what stood in her way. She was led into a small office where the doctor sat across from her, their expressions polite but distant. Lena laid the papers on the desk and explained everything. She told them how she had cared for Sophia since she was a baby, how she had raised her in the absence of a mother, how she had gotten tested in secret. Her voice shook at times, but her words were clear. I am ready to donate. I don't want money. I don't want recognition. I only want her to live. The doctors exchanged uneasy glances. Before she could finish her plea, one of them interrupted. With a firm shake of his head, I'm sorry, he said. It is impossible. Lina's heart sank. Why not? I'm a perfect match. Look at the results. Isn't this what she needs? The second doctor adjusted his glasses, his tone clinical. You are not a legal guardian or a blood relative. Hospital policy does not allow transplants from unrelated individuals in cases like this. The legal risks are too high. If anything were to happen to you, it could cost us our licenses. It didn't matter that Lena had wiped Sophia's tears, held her hand through every scan, and loved her more deeply than anyone else alive. To the hospital, she was just staff. She tried again, her voice breaking. She calls me mommy. She's my child in every way that matters. Please, I can't just stand by. But the answer was the same, no. By the time Lena left the hospital, her hands were shaking. The envelope that once felt like hope now felt like a useless piece of paper. She sat in her car and cried silently, her shoulders trembling. She had expected resistance, but not such a cold refusal. When she returned home, she knew she couldn't keep it a secret anymore. She found Daniel in the study and told him everything. At first, he didn't react. He stared at her in silence, his eyes wide, as if he hadn't understood the words. But then his face changed and his voice cracked. Don't you ever bring this up again, he said. Please, you're all Sophia has. I already lost my Wi-Fi. Can't lose you two. The words hit Lena harder than the doctor's rejection. She understood that Daniel cared for her. She understood that his fear of losing her was real. But she also realized something else. He wasn't thinking like a father desperate to save his child. He was thinking like a man who had already lost too much and couldn't face the possibility of losing again. This isn't your fight, he said firmly. But Lena knew he was wrong. It was her fight. She had promised herself long ago that if she ever had the chance to save a child, she would do everything in her power. She couldn't abandon that promise now. So, late that night, while the mansion slept, Lena opened her laptop. Once more. This time she didn't search locally. She looked at clinics and hospitals in other countries, places that accepted extreme and difficult cases. She tapped phrases like living donor transplant without family ties, urgent pediatric cases, international exceptions. Hours turned into dawn, and finally, she found something. A medical center overseas, known for accepting cases others had refused. Their website was filled with stories of hope, of patients given chances when all doors had been shut. Lina's heart beat faster as she filled out a form, attaching the test results and writing a long letter. She explained who she was, who Sophia was, and what she was willing to do. She expected to wait days or weeks for a reply. Instead, the very next morning, her phone buzzed. An email had arrived. A doctor named Idris wanted to speak with her directly. Her hands shook as she scheduled a video call. That evening, she sat in her small bedroom with an old phone, propped on a stack of books. The screen flickered, and then his face appeared. Dr. Idris was calm, kind, and his eyes carried a sadness that told her he had seen loss himself. He listened without interrupting as Lena poured her heart out. She told him about Sophia, about the rejection from the local hospital, about her love for the child she had raised. When she finished, there was silence. Then, Dr. Idris spoke quietly. Years ago, he said, I lost my own daughter. She had liver disease and died waiting for a donor. Since then, I've dedicated my life to saving children like her. What you're offering is rare, but I believe in it. If you are healthy and understand the risks, I will accept you as a donor regardless of your legal or blood ties. Lina's heart leapt. This was the chance she had prayed for. She agreed immediately, asking no questions about money or recognition. All she cared about was that Sophia would have a chance. Dr. Idris explained that everything would need to be done quietly. The procedures would be discreet to avoid legal complications. Lena nodded. She was ready. She didn't tell Daniel. She knew he would try to stop her again. This time, she wasn't asking permission. She was making a choice, the kind of choice a mother makes. Within days, the plan was in motion. Documents were arranged, flights were prepared, and the hospital overseas was waiting. She packed Sophia's things carefully, telling the other staff only that she was taking the girl for a private medical consultation. A trusted nurse, aware of the truth, helped her arrange transportation. Daniel was away on a business trip when Lena finally moved. She had waited for this window of time, knowing it was her only chance. 2 small bags, one for Sophia, one for herself, were placed in the car. As they drove to the airport, Lena held Sophia close and whispered, "We're going somewhere special, my love, somewhere that will help." Sophia, too young to understand the full truth, simply nodded. She trusted Lena more than anyone in the world. The flight was long and heavy with tension. Lena barely closed her eyes. Every time she looked at Sophia sleeping against her shoulder, she reminded herself why she was doing this. When they landed, it was late at night. A quiet wing of the hospital awaited them, discreet and private. They checked in under false names. Guided by Dr. Idris's team, everything was handled with secrecy. Doctors examined both Lena and Sophia again to confirm the results. The surgery was scheduled for the next morning. That night, Lena sat beside Sophia's bed. She stroked the little girl's hair and whispered promises of a better tomorrow. Sophia didn't know the full truth that Lena was about to give away part of her own body to save her. She only knew that Mommy Numberta had promised to help. Before dawn, Lena wrote a short letter and tucked it beneath Sophia's pillow. It said, "If I don't wake up, know that Mommy said yes." She sealed it with tears. If something went wrong, she wanted Sophia to understand that this was her choice, born not out of fear, but of love. And then she closed her eyes, calm at last. Tomorrow, everything would change. The morning of the surgery arrived quietly. The halls of the foreign hospital were calm, the air tense with preparation. Nurses moved swiftly, but without panic, their footsteps echoing against polished floors. Sophia was taken into one operating room, her small body wrapped in blankets. Lena was guided into another room nearby. The procedure was delicate, the timing critical. Within minutes of removing a portion of Lena's liver, it would need to be transplanted into Sophia. Lena's hands trembled as they prepped her for anesthesia, but her heart was steady. She whispered one last prayer, not for herself, but for Sophia. Let her live, let her laugh again. Then the sedative pulled her into darkness. The surgeries began. Hours passed like minutes. Skilled hands worked in silence, led by Dr. Idris himself. The rhythm of machines filled the air, steady beeps marking life. Every step was rehearsed, every move exact. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Daniel was finishing a business meeting when his phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. He nearly ignored it, but something urged him to answer. "Mr. Daniel," a calm voice said, "your daughter is currently in surgery." The world froze. Daniel stood so quickly his chair toppled over. "What surgery? What hospital?" His voice shook with panic. The nurse on the line explained. She gave the hospital's name, the country, and mentioned another name, Lena. Daniel's heart plummeted. He understood instantly. Lena had done the one thing he had begged her not to do. He didn't hesitate. He booked the first available flight, abandoning everything. The hours on the plane felt endless. His mind racing between fear, anger, and desperation. What if he was too late? What if he lost them both? By the time Daniel arrived, the surgery was over. He rushed through customs, barely speaking, and demanded a taxi to the hospital. His chest burned with dread as he pushed through the sliding doors. A nurse led him down a quiet corridor. At the end of the hallway stood the rooms. Inside the first, Sophia lay sleeping peacefully, her tiny hand bandaged, her chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Machines hummed gently beside her bed, but her face was calm, more peaceful than he had seen in months. In the second room, Lena lay unconscious, pale, tubes and monitors surrounding her. Her body had endured a brutal surgery, but she was alive. Daniel stood between the two rooms, his breath caught in his throat. He had never witnessed such sacrifice before, not in speeches, not in business, not in the wealth he had built. This was sacrifice in its truest form. For hours, he sat there, moving between their beds. He held Sophia's hand, then Lena's, tears streaming down his face. He remembered the letter Lena had left, folded under Sophia's pillow. A nurse had placed it in his hands earlier. With trembling fingers, he opened it. "If I don't wake up, Know that Mommy said yes. Daniel broke down. The words hit him harder than any loss he had ever endured. It wasn't a gesture of loyalty. It wasn't duty. It was love, the kind of love that gives everything without asking for anything in return. The doctors emerged from the operating rooms after 13 exhausting hours. Their faces were tired, but calm. The lead surgeon approached Daniel. The surgery was successful, he said. Daniel's knees nearly gave out. Relief washed over him in waves. Sophia's body had accepted the new liver. Her fever was dropping. Her heartbeat was steady. There were no signs of rejection. She was alive. On the other side of the hallway, Lina's condition was fragile. The trauma of surgery had forced the doctors to place her in an induced coma, giving her body the rest it needed. Her survival was uncertain, but the doctors remained cautiously optimistic. For the next 3 days, Daniel barely left the hospital. He lived between the two rooms, his eyes red from sleepless nights. He whispered to Sophia, telling her stories of when she was a baby, of the mother she had never met, and of the woman who had just risked her life to save her. On the third morning, Sophia stirred. Her eyelids fluttered and her lips parted. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. Daniel rushed to her side, gripping her hand as tears poured freely down his face. Her cheeks carried color again. Her tiny smile returned. "Can I have cake?" she asked softly. Daniel laughed and cried at once. The words, so simple, felt like the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. But then her eyes searched the room. "Where's Mommy number 2? She asked. Daniel froze. He wanted to tell her the truth that Lina was fighting for her life in the next room, but he couldn't bring himself to say it. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "She's resting. Sweetheart, she's very tired." Sophia nodded, trusting his answer. Later that afternoon, Daniel walked into Lina's room. Machines beeped steadily, her body pale and fragile beneath the blankets. He sat by her bed, holding her hand. "She asked for you," he whispered. "She wanted cake." She smiled. "Lina, she smiled because of you." He lowered his head, his voice breaking. Thank you for saving her, for saving me." In that room, surrounded by silence and machines, Daniel realized something he had never admitted before. Lina wasn't just the woman who had helped him raise Sophia. She was Sophia's mother, not by blood, not by law, but by the truest definition of the word love. The days after the surgery crawled by with unbearable slowness. Nurses checked Sophia's vitals every hour, carefully monitoring the new organ inside her. To their surprise, her body responded better than expected. Her fever subsided, her skin grew warm with color, and for the first time in months, she slept without restless tossing. Meanwhile, Lina remained unconscious in the other room. Tubes surrounded her, monitors traced every heartbeat, and doctors kept her in a controlled coma to let her body recover. Daniel split his time between the two rooms, walking the hallway so often that nurses began leaving a chair by each door just for him. On the 5th day, everything changed. A quiet beeping filled Lina's room as she stirred. Her eyelids fluttered. Her breathing deepened, slowly, painfully. She blinked against the harsh light until her vision cleared. The first thing she saw was a small figure. By her bedside, it was Sophia. The little girl was standing there, wearing a paper crown from the hospital's playroom. Her face beamed with joy as she shouted, "Mommy number 2, I'm alive." Tears blurred Lina's vision. She tried to speak, but her throat was dry, her voice no more than a whisper. Instead, she reached out with trembling fingers. Sophia grabbed her hand with both of hers, squeezing it tightly. For several minutes, they stayed like that, mother and daughter, bound not by blood, but by something stronger. The nurses who entered were moved to silence. They adjusted Lina's gives, checked her vitals, but nothing could interrupt the powerful moment unfolding before them. When Dr. Idris came in, he smiled warmly. "You're awake, Lina. The surgery went as well as we could have hoped. Your body is recovering. It will take time, but the hardest part is behind you." Lina closed her eyes in relief. Her sacrifice had not been in vain. Sophia was alive, smiling, standing by her side. That was all she had prayed for. Sophia, too young to understand the medical miracle, only knew one thing: her mommy had kept her promise. In the days that followed, Sophia's recovery became even more astonishing. The new liver not only kept her alive, but also allowed treatments to finally work. The cancer that had once spread uncontrollably began to shrink. For the first time, doctors spoke the word they had. Never dared to before hope. Daniel wept openly when he heard the news. He spent hours at Lana's bedside, telling her about every small improvement. She ate half a bowl of soup today, he whispered. She laughed when a nurse made a silly face. He held the letter she had written, now folded and worn from being read so many times, and whispered, "You saved her. You saved both of us." Word of what had happened began to ripple through the hospital. Nurses spoke about the woman who had given part of her liver to save a child that wasn't biologically hers. Some cried while telling the story during their shifts. Doctors who had spent their careers surrounded by cold numbers and statistics quietly admitted they had never seen such a pure act of love. It wasn't long before the story spread beyond the hospital walls. A local reporter heard whispers and began investigating. Soon, newspapers published headlines: "Caretaker donates liver to save employer's child." Social media picked it up, and within days, the story reached international platforms. People across the world were stunned. Messages of support poured in: letters, gifts, drawings from children who had read about Sophia. Some people called Lena a hero, others called her a saint. But Lena wanted none of it. She asked the hospital staff to protect her privacy. "I don't want cameras," she told them. "I don't want microphones. I just want her alive." To her, this wasn't a miracle to be broadcasted. It wasn't about fame or recognition or awards. It was simply what love does when pushed to the edge inside the hospital. However, everything felt lighter. Nurses smiled more often. Patients' families whispered hope in the sterile hallways. Even the doctor seemed renewed, reminded of why they had chosen their profession in the first place. Sophia, now sitting up in bed, asked every morning the same question: "Is mommy number to awake yet?" And when Lena finally was, Sophia refused to leave her side. She colored pictures at the edge of Lana's bed, told her stories about dreams she had, and sang silly songs until Lena laughed through her pain. For Daniel, watching them together changed everything. The walls of hierarchy, employer and employee, had crumbled. What remained was family, a family forged not through contracts or bloodlines, but through sacrifice and love. And the world was beginning to see it too. The hospital where Lena and Sophia stayed soon became more than a medical center. It became the heart of a story the world couldn't ignore. Nurses shared the tale with colleagues. Doctors mentioned it in conferences, and soon it spread far beyond their walls. Newspapers ran headlines that captured hearts. "Nanny gives part of herself to save employer's child, not bound by blood, but by love." Television anchors called it an act of pure courage. Social media platforms, filled with messages from strangers who had never met them but felt deeply moved, paintings, drawings, and poems were made in their honor. Children in classrooms wrote letters to Sophia, telling her how brave she was. Families facing illness found hope in their story. But beyond the admiration, questions began to surface. Why had Lena been refused in the first hospital? Why had rules prevented someone so clearly willing and medically compatible from saving a child's life? The debate spread quickly. Journalists uncovered that Lena's case wasn't the only one. Many other families had been denied living donations because the donor wasn't legally tied or related by blood. Some children and adults had died waiting. Even though willing matches were available, medical experts weighed in. Some defended the strict rules, saying they were necessary to prevent exploitation. Others argued the system was too rigid, that it had forgotten the human side of medicine. Love and commitment, one doctor said in an interview, could be just as strong as DNA. Within weeks, government health committees opened formal reviews. The director of the first hospital, the one who had signed the rejection in Lena's case, was suspended. Policies were placed under scrutiny, with activists pushing for reform. A few hospitals acted immediately, revising their rules to consider emotional bonds in donor eligibility. For the first time, medical systems began discussing compassion as part of the criteria, and everywhere, Lena's name appeared in those conversations. Meanwhile, she wanted nothing to do with the spotlight. When asked for interviews, she quietly refused. When offered awards, she shook her head. "Thank you," she would say softly, "but no, I don't need any of that." All she wanted was to sit by Sophia's side, to watch her heal. In the hospital garden, when Sophia was strong enough to walk again, Lena held her hand and guided her steps. Each laugh, each small bounce of energy, filled her with quiet pride. Daniel often watched from a distance, his heart heavy with gratitude. For him, everything had changed too. He no longer saw Lena as an employee. She had given his daughter life, in the truest sense. She had also given him something he thought he had lost forever, the chance to hope again. Global organizations reached out. A well-known medical foundation offered to fly Lena to a health summit, where she would be honored with a humanitarian award. Daniel showed her the email, insisting it was a chance to inspire others, but Lena smiled and shook her head. "I already have my reward," she said. She pointed to Sophia, who was chasing a butterfly in the hospital garden. "She's alive. That's all I ever wanted." Daniel didn't argue. He knew she meant it. The world could write articles, share stories, and change policies. Lena didn't need to be part of that noise. Her place was with Sophia, helping with school lessons, cooking her favorite meals, and singing her to sleep when nightmares came. To outsiders, she was a symbol of sacrifice. To Sophia, she was simply mommy number 2, and that was the only title Lena ever wanted. A year passed, and the house that had once felt like a silent mansion filled with sorrow was transformed. The halls that had echoed with footsteps of nurses and the hum of medical machines now rang with laughter, music, and the sound of a little girl truly living again. It was Sophia's 7th birthday, a day no doctor had expected her to see. The living room was decorated with colorful balloons, streamers, and handmade drawings from her school friends. A large cake, pink frosting spread across its surface, sat proudly on the table with a big number 7 candle at the center. Sophia wore a yellow dress that shimmered as she moved, and on her head was a small paper crown. Her hair, once gone from months of treatment, had returned in soft curls. Her cheeks glowed with health, her smile wide and full of life. Children gathered around her, clapping as she leaned forward to blow out the candles. 3, 2, 1. The room erupted in cheers as she blew them out in one strong breath. Daniel stood near the doorway with a camera in hand, recording every moment. His eyes were wet, but his smile was genuine. He had spent years drowning in loss. First his wife and nearly his daughter. But now, watching Sophia laugh with her friends, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Beside Sophia stood Lena, dressed simply in a blue blouse and jeans. She held the little girl's hand as though it were the most precious treasure in the world. To guests who knew the story, her presence was more powerful than words. She wasn't just a caretaker. She wasn't just a woman who worked in Daniel's home. She was the mother who had given Sophia a second life. Throughout the party, Lena moved quietly, making sure every child had juice, every plate had cake, every laugh was heard. People gave her gentle smiles, some even hugs, but she never lingered on the attention. This day wasn't about her. It was about Sophia. At one point, Sophia stopped playing and turned to Lena with a question that silenced the noise around them. Her voice was soft, but clear. "Mommy number 2. Now I'm really going to live, right?" The room stilled. Guests pretended to continue their conversations, but their ears caught every word. Lena knelt down so her eyes were level with Sophia's. She placed her hands gently on the girl's shoulders and touched her forehead to hers. Her voice was calm, steady, filled with warmth. "Yes, my love," she said. "You are going to live." Sophia's face broke into a smile, and she wrapped her arms tightly around Lena's neck. Around them, balloons floated and children laughed. But in that quiet moment, only the people existed, mother and daughter. Daniel, holding his camera, lowered it slowly. He didn't press record. He simply stood there, throat tight, realizing he was watching something sacred. This wasn't just survival, it was life, reborn. Later, when the children gathered to open presents, something special caught the eye of the adults. On a wooden shelf near the living room wall sat a framed piece of paper. Inside the frame was the letter Lena had written before the surgery. "If I don't wake up, know that Mommy said yes." Daniel had placed it there deliberately, not as decoration, but as a reminder. Every person who read those words felt their weight. They understood what it meant, that love is not measured by bloodlines, nor by last names, nor by legal papers. Sometimes the most powerful family bonds are chosen, carved out of sacrifice, and sealed by the willingness to give everything. As the sun set that evening, children laughed and played with their new toys. Sophia hugged her gifts, her face lit with joy. Lena watched her from the couch, her heart swelling with quiet gratitude. She didn't need applause, medals, or interviews. Her reward was right in front of her. Sophia alive, laughing, dreaming of tomorrow. The pain, the sleepless nights, the fear of losing it had all been worth it. Because now, When Sophia asked if she was really going to live, the answer wasn't just hope. It was a promise. Yes, she would live. And nothing in the world could be truer. Seasons passed, and with each one, Sophia grew stronger. The fragile girl who once lay in a hospital bed surrounded by machines was now running barefoot through the garden, chasing butterflies, her laughter carrying through the open windows of the mansion. Daniel often sat on the porch, a cup of tea in his hands, watching her play. There were times he would close his eyes and listen, almost disbelieving the sound. For years, silence had haunted these walls. Now, laughter had returned, filling every corner with warmth. Lena was always nearby. She had become more than a guardian. She was the center of Sophia's world. Morning routines began with her gentle voice calling Sophia to breakfast. Evenings ended with lullabies sung softly in the dim light of Sophia's room. She never complained of the scar across her stomach, never regretted the pain she had endured. Every time Sophia smiled, it erased the memory of suffering. To outsiders, their story remained extraordinary. Journalists continued to write about it. Schools shared it with students as an example of selfless love, and debates about donor laws still used Lina's name as a symbol. But within their home, life was simple again. It wasn't about headlines or recognition, it was about living. Sophia went back to school, her hair tied in neat braids. Children who had once whispered about her illness now invited her to games and parties. Teachers praised her for her resilience, often saying she carried wisdom beyond her years. Sometimes, Sophia would stand in front of the framed letter that Daniel had placed in the living room. She would trace the glass with her fingers, reading the words again. If I don't wake up, know that Mommy said yes each time. She would turn to Lena and ask, why did you do it? And each time, Lena gave the same answer, her voice steady, because love is something you do, not just something you feel. Daniel, once a man buried in grief, found himself changed as well. For years, he had defined strength by wealth, power, and control. But Lina's sacrifice taught him something far deeper, that true strength is in surrender, in giving without expecting anything in return. He no longer introduced Lena as the housekeeper. To guests and friends, he called her family, too. Sophia. She was Mommy number 2, but in truth, she was simply Mommy. There were nights when Daniel stood at his late wife's photograph, speaking quietly into the silence. You would be proud, he would whisper. Our daughter has 2 mothers, one who gave her life, and one who saved it. Years later, when Sophia stood tall as a young woman, she carried with her both stories. She remembered the mother she had never met, the one who gave her birth, and she cherished the mother who had given her a second chance, the one who had said yes when the world had said no. Together, their story became more than survival. It became a testament to the power of chosen love, the kind that crosses boundaries of blood and law, the kind that doesn't ask permission to give everything. Because family isn't always who you are born to. Sometimes it's who chooses to stay. Sometimes it's who risks it all to keep you alive. Sophia lived, she laughed, she dreamed. And every time she looked at Lena, she knew the truth. Her life was not just saved by medicine, it was saved by love. Years after the surgery, the story of Lena and Sophia still echoed far beyond their home. What began as a private battle between life and death had grown into something larger, an example the world could not forget. Hospitals used their case in medical schools, teaching future doctors about the importance of compassion alongside science. Professors reminded students that not all healing comes from prescriptions or procedures. Sometimes healing begins with love. In several countries, policies shifted. Where once strict rules had denied unrelated donors the chance to help, exceptions were now considered. Applications began to include a section called Significant Emotional Bond. It allowed teachers, guardians, even lifelong friends to step forward if they were healthy and willing. And in many of those reforms, Lina's name was quietly referenced as the spark that started it all. Letters continued to arrive at their home. Parents wrote to say they had been inspired to volunteer as donors. Children drew pictures of hearts, 2 mothers, and a smiling little girl. Some families who had lost loved ones said that Lina's courage softened their grief, reminding them that humanity could still be beautiful. But inside the mansion, the family rarely spoke of their fame. To them, life was about ordinary moments, the smell of cookies baking, Sophia's homework scattered on the dining table, laughter spilling out during weekend movie nights. Sophia herself grew more curious as she got older. She began to ask questions about the mother she had never known, the woman who had given her birth. but not her childhood. Daniel and Lena always answered honestly, showing her photographs, sharing stories of her mother's kindness, her laughter, the dreams she had carried. One evening, Sophia sat between Daniel and Lena on the couch. She looked at both of them with seriousness far beyond her years. "I have two mothers," she said simply, "one in heaven and one right here. That makes me the luckiest girl in the world." Daniel's throat tightened, and Lena's eyes filled with tears. The little girl who had once whispered, "Am I going to live, Mommy?" was now old enough to answer the question herself. She was living and thriving. Their bond deepened with time, but so did their impact on others. Schools invited Sophia to speak as she grew older. She often told classrooms, "Being strong doesn't mean never crying. It means loving someone enough to fight for them, even when it's scary." Her words touched many because they came not from a stage, but from experience. Every time she spoke, Lena sat quietly in the back, watching with pride. She never stepped forward for applause. She never claimed credit. To her, the truest reward was simply seeing Sophia's voice carry into the world. And though the cameras, articles, and debates would fade with time, one truth would remain unshakable. Their story had proven that family isn't built by rules. It is built by sacrifice, by presence, by love that says yes when the world says no. Time has a way of softening memories. But some stories never fade. For Sophia, her childhood was not defined only by sickness, but by the love that pulled her through it. Years passed, and the fragile girl who once lay in a hospital bed grew into a strong young woman. She excelled in school, not only because of her intelligence, but because she carried inside her a quiet determination. Every exam, every project, every step into the future felt like borrowed time that had been given back to her. When she turned 18, her classmates celebrated with music and laughter. But for Sophia, the day carried an extra weight. She stood in front of her birthday cake, staring at the candles, and remembered another cake years earlier, the one she had barely been strong enough to eat. The memory was sharp, but it no longer brought fear. It brought gratitude. Lena sat beside Daniel that day, her smile soft, her scars still hidden beneath her dress. Though the world might never fully understand the depth of what she had done, Sophia did. And as the candles flickered, she whispered a wish that needed no words. "Thank you for my life." As she grew into adulthood, Sophia chose to study medicine. Her dream wasn't just to become a doctor, it was to stand in the same place where Dr. Idris once stood, to look at desperate families and say, "There's still hope." During her medical school interviews, she was asked what inspired her. She answered honestly, "I am alive today because someone who didn't have to save me chose to. I want to spend my life doing the same for others." Her professors were moved, her peers inspired. But to Sophia, it wasn't about being extraordinary. It was simply carrying forward the gift she had been given. Lena, older now, often sat in the garden with a blanket over her lap, watching Sophia leave for her classes. Her body sometimes reminded her of the price she had paid, the ache of her scar, the occasional fatigue, but her heart was lighter than ever. Each day Sophia walked out the door with books in her arms. Lena whispered a prayer of thanks. Daniel, too, had changed. The man, once hardened by loss, now carried a gentler spirit. He no longer counted success in business deals, but in dinners shared around the table, in laughter echoing down hallways, in quiet evenings where his daughter leaned on his shoulder. When Sophia finally graduated in her white coat, she gave her first speech not to her peers, but to her family. Standing on the stage, she pointed to Lena in the crowd. "I am here today because of her," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "She is not my biological mother, but she gave me life twice, once through love and once through sacrifice. She is proof that family is not always given by blood. Sometimes it is chosen, and it is stronger than anything else in this world." The audience rose to their feet in applause. Lena wept quietly, covering her face, not used to the spotlight. Daniel placed his hand over hers, whispering, "You deserve this." That evening, back home, Sophia placed her graduation certificate beside the framed letter that had sat in the living room for so many years. "If I don't wake up, know that Mommy said yes." She touched the glass gently and whispered, "You woke up, and because of you, so did I." The house, once filled with silence and sorrow, now stood as a place of laughter, resilience, and love. The world outside might forget details, headlines might fade, but within these walls, the truth would always remain. A little girl had asked, "Am I going to live, Mommy?" And years later, the answer was clear. Yes, she lived, and she carried that love with her forever.